How important is it to you that your elected officials are ethical people? And what does that even mean? Besides the you know it when you see it approach, in Miami-Dade there are defined laws that determine ethics and a commission that investigates complaints about unethical public officials. With us today, Jose Arrojo, Executive Director of the Miami-Dade Ethics Commission, in a pretty rare interview. And we are, Jose, so grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
I know ethics is done, the investigations behind closed doors, by design, by necessity. So I'm really grateful that you're here and having as much of a transparent conversation as we can.
Thank you again.
So we're facing a bunch of municipal elections coming up this week and in the next couple of weeks. And some of the candidates running are ethically questionable according to the county's laws, and some might have been past investigations and current investigations. What should voters know?
So we do have some candidates that are running for municipal positions right now, and they've been the subject of past cases. Some of them are the subjects of currently open and filed cases. And perhaps some of them may be the subject of future cases that we really can't talk about. But clearly, for someone in my position, I think that an elected official's ethical behavior or unethical behavior should be a central consideration for a voter in any election.
So you just said two things. Now connect them for us. So if you are doing an ethics investigation, I mean, innocent until proven guilty, right? You don't want to paint anybody as unethical who may not be. But how does a voter know that? And how could a voter act on that question if there's no way to know who's being investigated?
So while you're under investigation, just like a criminal case, before the actual charges are filed, it's confidential. But once the charges are filed, I think what a voter has is, even initially, right, there's a very, very rich, factually rich investigation that goes on. There are reports that are available. We try to push that out to the community so they know it. So, if you're a voter that wants to be informed on current cases, there are ways, there are public records, and we push it out. The material is there. The voter just needs to, make a little effort to inform themselves on what's been produced in these investigations.
So when you and I talked earlier, I sensed a great frustration that doesn't happen. Why do you think that doesn't happen?
So I think that anyone that watches government or anyone that's an informed citizen realizes that there is perhaps a certain degree of lack in confidence in government, right? And so it's frustrating for someone that does my type of work or my commission's work, because every little unethical transaction, every little transaction where it creates an appearance of impropriety, it seems to me that it chips away a little bit at citizens' confidence in government.
Well, let's get in the weeds a little bit with this. I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody, but don't kill the messenger. The District 1 incumbent, who is now charged with a crime, Alex Diaz de la Portilla, is running. His office and his employees have been charged in ethics cases and fined. Go into that a little bit. And should we take that, extrapolate that?
Well, so I'm not going to use the term extrapolate, but I'll use the term should a citizen consider that? Yeah, I think a citizen should consider, what an elected official, staff members do, right? I mean, I think elected officials have some responsibility for whom they hire, and it should have some responsibility, for the supervision of the folks that they hire. And it's true, we have had 3 cases that have closed out involving City of Miami employees who have been charged with ethical transgressions or violations of the ethics code. And it's not just in that elected official's office. In other, there have been elected employees across the City of Miami that have been charged with similar conduct. And again, I think that it should be fodder for any voter that's evaluating why he or she is voting for a candidate.
Let me ask you, we don't have an enormous amount of time together, but there's something that goes on in certain elections, and I'm just going to say it out loud. Identity politics in South Florida is a thing. White, Black, Hispanic, Haitian, if your candidate looks like you, it's a good chance you're going to vote for them. Candidates know that and play to that in their campaign, which doesn't necessarily mean the best candidate wins. It means whoever's closest and plays the identity politics card wins. Is identity politics ethical?
Well, let me say it this way. Identity politics are not a violation of the county ethics code, right? I mean, our identity politics a reality in South Florida? Absolutely. Anyone that's lived here long enough sees that. I mean, I'm a little hopeful, right? I'm a little hopeful that maybe some of that may be falling away. I know that in nonpartisan elections, for example, in judicial elections that I follow, I think that that may be less of a factor today than it was years ago. So I'm hopeful. But you know, maybe one of the reasons why you might want to look to ethics investigations and investigative reports is that these are objective reports, and it doesn't matter whether you're Hispanic or Haitian or African American. You know, the facts are what the facts are.
Facts are what the facts are. I pulled one recent case, just very quickly in the minute we have left. Looks like someone who was a contractor and a lobbyist who was found to have improperly lobbied and was fined and accepted the fine. The fine was, I think, was like $500. So you did the work, you closed the case, you fined. If I'm a lobbyist making a lot of money on a contract, $500 is not much of a penalty. How does that affect what you do?
So this is the way that I respond to that, and we get that criticism, you know, from time to time, or perhaps more often than I want to admit. That okay, so you've gone through the process, you've been found guilty of the violation, you've been assessed a $500 fine, a $1,000 fine. Okay, so now we go on, right? So we've done our work, right? The ethics commissions have done our work. It seems to me that now it's incumbent upon voters, right, or business people to pick up that product and say, okay, so maybe this is not, you know, this is something that we're going to consider when we go to, you know, when we go to punch our ballot, right? I mean, you know, citizens can't get away from their responsibility, it seems to me, to be fully informed, and it's sad if that happens.
Sounds like you and I and we here do a lot of the same work,
yes,
informing the public. Jose Arrojo, I'm great to have you here. I didn't ever think you would be publicly speaking with us, so I feel privileged.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Much.
Thank you very much.
All right, we will be right back. We are back for a few minutes more with Jose Arrojo, who is the executive director of the Miami-Dade Commission on Ethics. I want to go back to something we were talking about in the last break about this one in particular. I just chose, you know, a recent opinion. $500 fine for a lobbyist making a lot of money on a contract is, you know, is it a deterrent to not do it again? Probably not. But to your point, there might be criminal charges that result from these cases.
Yeah, I think you know, a lot of times the focus is on an ethics case that results for us successfully with the, you know, with an issuance of a letter of reprimand or with a fine or with costs. But you know, also, you know, on you know, every year and a half, you know, one of our cases does get referred to, you know, to law enforcement, and those cases, you know, are investigated with law enforcement, and criminal charges are filed. Over the last couple of years, we've had elected officials that have been charged with crimes. They've been removed from office. There's a you know, a case right now that's pending that's received a lot of attention that, you know, that came up as an ethics case, and we were able to partner with law enforcement, and that case is pending. So
which one? Whoa, which one?
Well, I mean, so
Can you say?
Yeah, of course. Well, there's a case in the city of Miami against a former commissioner who's currently a candidate, and that case is pending, you know, before
Alex de la Portilla.
That's correct.
You won't say the name.
That is correct. That's correct. It's a matter of the public record. So you know, sometimes ethics cases, you know, do have very, very significant significant consequences, you know, when they result, you know, in a criminal case and a removal from office, and, you know, potentially in deprivation of liberty. So it's not always that there's just a fine.
So, you know, in that race, District 1 for Miami is Miguel Gabella versus Alex Diaz de la Portilla, who has been suspended because of those criminal charges. Should he win, and he thinks that he will, he's actually very certain that he's going to be the next commissioner, what happens then?
Well, so, I mean, what happens next has absolutely nothing to do with us. I mean, with the ethics commission.
Complaint?
Correct. I mean, so we have a pending ethics complaint that's being prosecuted right now by our office, and then there's a separate criminal complaint, and you know, I would think that that's entirely up to the governor of the state of Florida, you know, whether he would be removed again or not removed again. But before you get to the state of Florida, it's up to the citizens of District 1 to decide who they're going to select for that position.
You know, staying with Miami, we had the mayor, Francis Suarez, on some months ago. He's facing investigations of various sorts, and he made it a point to say there was an ethics investigation that was closed, no charges filed. And he was right about that. But the reason it was closed was not because of the content, but because of a technicality. The person who complained didn't have what's known as first-hand knowledge of the details of his complaint. How difficult is it to get a complaint to go forward?
So let me answer your question and make a little pitch at the same time, right? So yes, that's true. So in order, if you file a third-party complaint with our agency, you have to have firsthand knowledge of the complaint, right? We can't base our complaints on speculation or innuendo because that's not fair.
Report.
It's not fair, right?
What about a news report?
Well, you know, so here's what I would say: if you file a complaint based on a news report, that complaint may not go forward. But it doesn't mean that we're going to ignore it, right? I mean, you know, news reports for us are a fertile area of information. So just because the complaint doesn't go forward doesn't mean that our investigators won't pick that up, investigate it, and try to accumulate the type of evidence that we would need to file an ethics complaint. So, you know, when a complaint gets dismissed like that, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the end of the process, right? The process could go on.
So if I did a report, we've done reports here, would you see this news report where we would show public documents, how we found this fact? Would that be a basis? Could you open an investigation on your own based on what you see?
So one of the good things about the Ethics Commission in Miami-Dade County, perhaps different from the State Ethics Commission in Tallahassee, is we have the ability to self-initiate reports. So we can look to news reports, we can look to tipsters, we can look to third-party complaints, whatever the source is out there. If there's reliable information that we can rely upon, we can self-initiate a case. And we can file it. And to be sure, our investigators and all of us, you know, we all read the media and we read, you know, any source of information that's out there. We're going to take a hard look at it, and that could be the basis for a case.
Do you think South Florida, the DNA is its corruption might be so baked in that people who might otherwise blanch at an ethics breach considers it maybe something they're so accustomed to that it doesn't rise to the level of being shocking?
So I'm going to defend South Florida for a second.
That's what I usually do, but
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm going to defend South Florida for a second. I mean, I think that there's a certain, I think that there's a certain feeling in the community that it's, oh, this is just more of the usual. I don't think that that's entirely unique to South Florida. I don't think it's entirely unique to, you know, to big cities. I mean, certainly there are other big cities across the country and big states and little states. And you know, some of the worst cases you see coming up in small towns where everything is very, very incestuous and insular. So I don't necessarily think that it's just us here in South Florida. I think it's an issue nationally.
All right. Well, you've dispensed some really good advice, and I hope voters are listening. And it's great to have you, Jose Arrojo. And keep in touch. I'll be hounding you for some things.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.